Good evening. I now call to order the regular meeting of the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury dated Thursday, January 7, 2016. A couple housekeeping items. Please silence all your cell phones. And if anyone wishes to speak on any item, we have some blue slips in the back room. Please fill those out and bring them to Miss Jessica Williamson, who's standing in the front right here, please. I was just informed that we're going to have the invocation of Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Stelly, and that was Mr. McMillan's request.
Mr. President, no, we're not.
Okay.
I would ask that Ms. Griffin do it for me, please.
Ms. Griffin, are you okay with that?
Yes.
All right.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, it is again, we are so thankful that you have allowed for us to come together to take care of business for your people. We ask that you would be with us as we make decisions that will affect many lives. And we pray that the things we say and do tonight will be acceptable in your sight. Furthermore, we ask that you would continue to bless Calcasieu Parish Police Jury members, our staff, and all of our people, our places, and our things. We ask a special blessing on the United States of America, and may the state of Louisiana forever be the apple of your eyes. Grass withers and the flowers faded away, but the word of the Lord will last forever. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Elizabeth and Mr. Stelly. Roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Farnham?
Here.
Mrs. Griffin?
Present.
Here.
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 Mr. McMillan?
Here.
Here.
Scott?
Here.
Mr. Simeon?
Here.
Bell?
Here.
Mr. Stelly?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Vice President Trimmie? Here. And President Hunter?
Here.
You have a
Thank you, ma'am. Item number 4, presentation of a retirement certificate to McDonald James for 38-plus years of service, of dedicated service to the citizens of Calcasieu Parish. Mr. Crane.
Mr. President, members of the jury, Mac, if you could come on up here. Or start making your way. I'm truly honored to congratulate Mac on his retirement from the police jury. I worked with Mac since 2000 and enjoyed our time together. I have a deep respect for him and value his opinion as a colleague. Mac's 38 years, almost 4 decades, of dedicated service to his work, the police jury, the Division of Planning and Development, and the citizens of this parish cannot be underestimated. Mac has always approached any given assignment, task, or challenge with eagerness, a readiness to learn, and the best interests of the police jury and the citizens of Calcasieu Parish at the forefront. Matt began his employment with the police jury on August the 8th, 1977, serving as the first director of the housing department. In 2000, after 23 years of serving as the director of housing, Mac transferred to the Division of Planning and Development, where he took on the task of developing and implementing procedures for the disposal of adjudicated property. While all of Mac's accomplishments and contributions during his time with the parish are too numerous to mention, I would like to highlight a few. During his time with the housing department, Mac implemented programs such as weatherization, the housing rehabilitation program, and helped with the development of the Christmas in April program. During his time with the Division of Planning and Development, Mac was instrumental in setting up the adjudicated property process. Through this process, the police jury and other taxing entities have recouped delinquent property taxes while getting these burdensome properties back in commerce and on the tax rolls. Outside of the parish, Mac initiated, lobbied for, and assisted with drafting the legislation proclaiming gumbo, a thick African soup over rice, to be the official cuisine of Louisiana. Thank you, Mac. In addition to these highlights, when I think of Mac, I think of music. He always had music playing in his office. Christmas cards. He always designed fabulous Christmas cards. youthful appearance, no gray hair. Mathematics. Before employment with the police jury, Mac obtained a degree in mathematics from McNeese and taught in the public school system for 8 years, in which the last 6 he taught at Barb High School. Mac believed that mathematics should be taught as an appreciation and logical sequence rather than a discipline. I also think of Mac with sports, football and tennis, and most of all, family. He loved his family. In closing, Mac, I want to thank you for your service to our division, the police jury, and our community. Because of your 38 years of service to Calcasieu Parish, the citizens of this parish have benefited immensely, and this parish has been made a better community. You have touched many lives. I wish you well in your retirement and hope our paths continue to cross. And remember, Mac, just as you always remind everyone, it's going to be copacetic. We do have a plaque, and I'll present it to Mac, and it says, this is a certificate of appreciation presented by the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury on the 7th day of January 2016 to McDonald James, Real Estate Coordinator, Division of Planning and Development, in recognition and appreciation of 38-plus years of service to the citizens of Calcasieu Parish. Congratulations and best wishes on your retirement. Signed by Nicholas E. Hunter, President, Calcasieu Parish Police Jury. Thank you.
And to the jury and the audience, I appreciate it, and may God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. Before you head out there, Mr. James, got a few people that would love to make some comments. Mr. Guillory.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not going to be long because I know everybody's going to say anything, but Mac, I'm going to miss you. I miss when I would go in your office, that music, and it felt so good when I go in your office and I talk to you and everything. And I just want to say, Liz, you're taking everybody with you. Thank you, Mac. You've been great. You've been really great to this. Ever since I've been up here, you've been really great in helping me and everything. Thank you, Mac.
Thank you, Mr. Guillory. Ms. Trimming.
Yes, Mac, thank you for teaching me basically boots on the ground of what to do and how to do things. And being a mentor and a friend. And I just want to let you know that area off of Highway 27 where we completely redid every home in that area, you did it with ever how you did it, I'm not sure, with a federal grant. The signs, the highway signs are still up. They're still up, going both ways, denoting that this area right here was done by you. And I just want to let you know that you're going to be sorely missed, and we just want you to have a wonderful retirement after 38 years, and we just want to let you know how much we appreciate what you did for the parish, for all the people of Calcasieu Parish, but I thank you personally for everything that you've done for me, and thank you for your beautiful Christmas cards. They were wonderful.
Thank you, Ms. Trimming. Mr. Guidry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mac is the type of guy that will tell you, even if you're feeling a little bit of pressure on situations and things like that, and Wes could not have said it better. I walked into his office one day with the situation that was stressing me out, Mac, and you said to me when I sat down, everything's going to be copacetic. I'm saying, Mac, these people still screaming, it's going to be copacetic, Kevin. We're going to take care of it. And you did take care of it. And let me tell you, the one thing that I admire more about Mac that he always impressed upon us, knowledge is power. And you've always said that to me, Mac. And, you know, when you get older, you learn these things. When you're young, it's not always clear as to how you see it and how it all plays out. But I just want to say to you, Mac, best Christmas cards ever, ever. And I tell you what, I hope they continue to come, Mac. Mac, we love you, and we're going to continue to pray for you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guidry. Mr. Anderpont.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. Also, Mac was the second person to greet me when I first arrived here 24 years ago. And you don't remember that, I know, but I do, because I was impressed, I was green, I was nervous, and I didn't know really which way to turn. All of the years that I've been here, I've never met Mac once that he didn't say, if I can ever help you, don't forget to call me. In fact, he told me that a while ago, I'm leaving, but I'm still going to be here if you need me. What I want to know is, when I got here, I had hair, it was black. And you've been here longer than I have, and your hair is still black. I don't know what the secret is, but don't leave until I get with you, okay? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Anderpont. Mr. McMillan.
Hey, in Southwest Louisiana, we got a guy named Bruce Hamilton who says no bad days. Mac, I've never seen you have a bad day. I mean, you are so positive, and it brings us all up. Thank you for doing that, because when you're around, you got to be happy. That smile of yours is infectious. You're very knowledgeable in what you do, and you've been a great service to this parish. Thank you for being a part of our lives here in Calcasieu Parish. Thank you, Mac.
Mr. Spell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mac, I just want to let you know, always bumped into him in the halls, walking around the police jury building. Always had a smile on his face. Always said hello. I want to just thank you for your service, and God bless you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spell. Mr. James, thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Simeon.
Just in case nobody knew it, Mac has a second profession now. He's wearing us out at the SWLA Center for Health Services, trying to keep up with him working out.
Whoa.
And Ms. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I consider you a friend for years and years and years, and you really helped me a lot. I worked with you in your department. I was assigned as the liaison when I first got on the jury, and that's when I really began to know you. I appreciate all that you've done. You've touched many lives, and a lot of people will not forget that. God bless you on your retirement. And I know it's highly recommended.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. All right. Thank you, Mr. James.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mac.
Thank you, Mac.
Item number 5, receive report from the Louisiana Department of Transportation Development, LADOTD, representative regarding the I-210 bridge repair project and accompanying traffic control plan. Mr. Connor.
Yes, Mr. Hunter, I want to introduce Mr. Todd Landry. He's the district administrator, engineer at 07, and he's here to kind of give you a brief update on the I-210 repair project and the traffic control plan, and I'm sure you'll have some questions for him afterwards. So at that, I'll turn it over to Todd, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tim. As most of you may know, we have a large project coming up on the I-210 bridge. It's going to be the main span redecking project. We will also be changing out the barrier rails on that bridge and doing some other work to the approach slabs and some other structural work on the bridge. The project will last approximately 2 years. The letting is scheduled for March, which means construction will probably begin in this summer, sometime, midsummer maybe, depending on the time it takes to assemble materials and that sort of thing. So there are a lot of details, of course. There's going to be traffic control is going to be one of our primary focuses. It will be down to 2 lanes. The 210 bridge will be down to 2 lanes at times. We're going to try to minimize that time, and specifically as the new decks are being poured for the main span. The main span deck is 930 feet long. It has to be replaced. And so we will be removing and replacing the main span deck over the navigational channel. So that's kind of the gist of it. Traffic control is a big deal, and we're going to have many message boards, many signs, many public information releases to let the area know what's going on, when lanes will be closed, when they will be open, when there's traffic congestion, when when there are accidents, all of this kind of stuff. We're going to do our best to broadcast that kind of information to get traffic moving around. So I know you probably have questions, and so I'll entertain those.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Todd. Before he announced this, his hair was black.
That's right, just a year ago.
Man, there's a lot of rumors swirling out there. 2 years of shutting down the 210 bridge to one lane with all the economic development coming, people are panicking. One rumor I want to kind of spell or let you talk about it because it was out there, that the casinos had shortened the time span from 2 years down to 6 months. Is there any way that it's going to be any shorter than 2 years? Is that just a rumor that's floating around out there?
It's probably a rumor. The length of the total length of the project is approximately 2 years. That doesn't mean it will be down to 2 lanes for 2 years. We're trying to minimize that time for only the time it takes to replace the main span deck, which could be as little as a year, where it will be down to 2 lanes only. We're going to try to keep 3 lanes as much as possible, which will make a lot of difference, believe it or not. We know we're going to experience backups almost every day in Lake Charles. And that will include some on I-10 as well, especially if there are accidents. So we have been meeting with the local law enforcement and the emergency personnel. Several meetings already, several more to go to refine the details. And of course, you can have the best plan in the world, but when it comes down to game time, your plans are adjusted. But we are making plans. So
now, next thing was out there too. All the 18-wheeler traffic is going to be diverted over the I-10 bridge, and there's a whole lot of folks out there are nervous. Is the I-10 bridge safe? Could you address that for me?
the I-10 bridge is safe for traffic. We do inspections on it annually, biannually. We do maintenance on it all the time. As you know, if you travel that stretch of road, you know we're always up there doing maintenance and repairs on it to keep it safe. So the bridge is safe, regardless of whatever rumors there are or what you read on Facebook.
And you feel that everybody feels that it's absolutely safe enough for all the 18-wheeler traffic, the added weight on that bridge, everything's going to be just
Well, there are factors of safety that are included in any kind of design, and so, yes, I mean, it is safe for that. Now, will it experience more deterioration? Maybe, and we're even trying to up our efforts as far as maintenance goes and repair crews go to make repairs as needed. In fact, we're doing an inspection, a large inspection prior to the I-210 bridge starting. So you will see some lane closures on I-10, and we'll be out there doing inspections and taking notes, because we do have a rehab project on the I-10 bridge, which will commence on the heels of this I-210 project.
Last question. Is there any way you could change the time of this 210 bridge being rehabbed? Do you have to do it at this time frame? If so, why?
Well, it needs to be done at this time because the I-210 bridge deck has experienced its useful life, and it's nearing the end of that. We're taking precautions. We're doing it because it needs to be done. There probably is no good time from now on. There might have been a better time 2 or 3 years ago to do it, but at that point it wasn't in the cards. And so funding's available. That's only one reason we're doing it. The main reason is it needs to be done.
Todd, thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for communicating with us on this too, because there has been a lot of questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir. Mr. Guillory.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Todd, have y'all considered doing most of the work at night or no?
Yes, in fact, this project is it's going to go A+B bidding, which means that the days will be bid. So there are value to the days. If a contractor can build it in less days, he will. I'm sure that those guys in the cards, they will see that some night work is going to be beneficial, and they will do that. It is not required that they do it at night, but it is. We would like to see them do it at night. But because of the cost of doing business, it's probably, night work probably will happen. It's hard for us in this realm where we do an independent contract to say you must work at night when we're saying, you know, you're bidding the days. So if a contractor can do the entire project in 500 days, then he will. As far as replacing the deck, doing it at night or during the day won't matter because one whole side will have to be stopped, will have to be closed. So whether they're working 24/7 and doing the same amount of work they could do in a 12-hour day, you know, night work wouldn't benefit in that case. So yes, hopefully they will be doing some work at night, but forcing them to work at night is probably it's not that much beneficial. I would not.
Okay, Mr. Todd. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir. Mr. Brain.
Thank you, Mr. President. I didn't hear you mention in the scope of the project that the bridge is going to be lit after that, if you're going to put lighting on the bridge.
Yes, we are putting lighting on the bridge.
So this includes lights?
Yes, sir. In fact, there is a lighting project that's already starting, and it will be ongoing, and it is from the I-10 interchange with 210, and it goes all the way to Cove Lane. So some lighting will be being done before this and during the project, and we do have also lights on this project. So the whole thing, at the end of this project, the whole thing will be lit from Cove Lane interchange, basically all the way to I-10.
Perfect. I know it's been wired for electrical since the bridge was built and no lights have been installed, so I just want to
Yeah,
make
that's
sure.
in the contract.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I'm done, Mr. President.
Yes, sir. Mr. Scott.
Yeah, Mr. Landry, a couple months ago, there were some changes to the MAP program, the Motor Assistance Patrol. I know it's already been increased, but during this time, is there going to be even more patrols to help with the problem? Is that in the...
Yes, in fact, we're adding a whole nother MAP truck just because of this project, trying to get them in there to run 24/7. So we do have 2 MAP patrol trucks for the parish. This will be a 3rd one just because of this project. Now, they may swing and do the I-10 segment and come back, but they're dedicated because of this project.
Will they be dedicated at certain times to stay at the 210 part of it?
We can. We're going to put them where we see the need.
I got you.
Mr. Scott, yeah.
So when after this project is let and you get bids in, are you going to come back and kind of maybe fill us in with some more details as far as maybe how the traffic control is going to be put into place, just to make sure we can get information out to the public?
Right, because we are working on the details of the traffic control now, and there are a lot of details. So, yeah, I'll be glad to come back.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir. Mr. Farnham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know you discussed the nighttime activity. What about the start times in the mornings? Are we going to try to stay away from the peak hours of the mornings? I know getting to work on time is critical. Getting home is more of an inconvenience. And so if we could stay away from the peak rush in the morning, that would be very beneficial to everybody, both in Sulphur and Lake Charles.
There may be some times where, when we do have it open to 3 lanes, for instance, we could do that, especially have those 3 lanes open, especially during the peak times, and at night maybe close one of those lanes so that they can get more work done. As I said, the way that this is designed is actually, you know, there are 2 separate bridges divided by a center barrier. So the one direction is going to be completely shut down, and we'll have 2-way traffic on the other side. So, for instance, the north side will be completely shut down while the south side's got traffic running, you know, both directions. So they're going to run 24/7 in those lanes. So you know.
Well, I guess what I was getting at is when there's activity in an area, traffic seems to slow down just by general nature. It's like a police officer on the side of the road, and traffic's just going to slow down because of the presence. And it's probably the same thing with the workers. People tend to be a little more cautious when there's activity there.
Right.
Even though it may be on the other side of the center line barrier, they're still going to slow down just by nature, I think. So it just the sheer presence there is going to be an obstruction to the traffic.
You make a good point. But I'm afraid the peak hour is going to last a long time in the morning and the afternoon, and if we limited that, I mean, we'd have to extend the project even longer duration to be able to offset those interruptions.
Yeah, I'm sure y'all are gonna do everything possible to get this thing behind us.
Yeah.
It's better to have gray hair than no hair.
Yeah, I guess so.
Hey,
I got both.
Thank you,
for
Mr. President.
yourself. Thank you, Mr. Farnham. Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. President. I had heard that there was another project for the Interstate 10 area right there by Highway 108 City Service to redo that particular area. When is that coming up? And how would that affect this?
I think that's planning to let in 17, 18. So hopefully that will be near the heels of this project. However, if we decide to begin that project, I'm sure that we're going to look at it in time to make sure that there is no conflict or an additional burden on the traffic. So that, I mean, you make a good point, but it's not scheduled to let in the next year or so.
Okay. The other thing I had, why can't you require them to do most of the work at night? I go through Texas all the time, and they're working at night all the time, and then...
We can, but we're not putting any traffic on those lanes anyway, so requiring them to work at night, they're still going to bid against one another. They're not going to bid any, you know...
Right.
The cost is prohibitive, and the benefit you get from that is almost nothing.
Because Mr. Farnham,
correct. In this case, now, some projects is totally different.
Right. Because he is correct. I mean, and particularly this particular area of the country, you know, we have a lot of industry, so there really is no... Yeah, when some people are getting off, the other group of people are, you know, coming on work because you work shift work. So those particular morning and afternoons, plus all the daytime traffic, it seems like nighttime would be a little bit more beneficial to the traffic in the area.
You're right, and we're going to try to encourage them to work at night, and I'm sure you will see them working at night out there, even though we haven't.
I'd rather be working more at night than during the day, so that's why I didn't understand if you can't put that in the bidding process that they work at night the majority of the time.
The thing is, I think what you'll see is they're going to be working at night anyway. If we put it in a contract, it's going to increase the cost of the job by 25%, and we're not going to get 25% time savings.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Scott?
Yeah, Mr. Landry, one last question. What's the total cost of this project?
Estimated between 20 and 30 million right now.
Oh, that's a small window. 20.
Well,
it works in the federal state budget.
It's still working.
That works. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Hunter,
Yes.
we could, while Todd's here, it's indirectly related, but I was curious if you've done any assessments early on about how much the new Cove Lane interchange has helped with the traffic in Nelson. I know it may not be too long, but it seems like it's made a big difference.
It has. We've done some traffic counts, and if you travel that, especially westbound in the afternoon, the Nelson Road off-ramp is not backed up half a mile down I-210 anymore. That's just one evidence of that. But we have done some traffic counts. It's hard to put an actual value on the benefit, but it's tremendous, I can tell you that.
Thank you, Mr. Landry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 6, take appropriate action on applications for liquor and beer permits. Mr. Crane.
Mr. President, we have 2 applications before you tonight. We recommend they both be approved.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Landry, second by Mr. Taylor. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 7, consideration of
Move
approving
on 7.
payment of all current invoices. Motion by Mr. Andropont, second by Mr. Scott. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 8, consideration of approving the minutes of the regular meeting of the police jury dated December 3rd, 2015. Motion by Mr. Guillory, second by Ms. Griffin. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 9, consideration of adopting a resolution calling an election for April 9, 2016 for authority to levy and collect ad valorem tax of 1.5 mils on all accessible property within Calcasieu Parish for 10 years beginning in 2016, with collections from levy of the tax estimated to be $2,591,737 for one entire year tax, and to fund the tax into debt for acquisition, construction, operation, and maintenance of the National Hurricane Museum and Science Center Incorporated. and for maintenance and operation of all qualifying Calcasieu Parish museums. I have a motion by Mr. McMillan and a second by Mr. Scott. We do have some discussion on this item. I'll call up a couple speakers. First, Mr. Gray Stream. Mr. Stream, your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, Gray Stream, 3965 South Blue Sage Road, Lake Charles. Thank you, members of the jury, for having me, and thanks for having this on the agenda this evening. Thanks as well. It's been a huge privilege of mine to have been asked by some of the public leaders of our area a few years back to get involved in this effort, and for some of our other local leaders to do as well. On behalf of the directors of the 8 museums represented here this evening, I'd like to thank you on their behalf as well, and the consideration of putting this on the ballot in April. At this time, I'd actually like to recognize whoever's here and ask them to stand, volunteers and directors, if they would. I see several in the audience. Thank you all. You know, as we think about Calcasieu Parish, both past, present, and of course, our dynamic future, we have to ask ourselves, what does it take to continue to preserve that past as we grow and find ourselves changing into a very different area, and also have ambitions toward how we define ourselves in the future. And not necessarily just with incremental steps, but with some really ambitious plans. We have to ask, certainly, as we grow, can we create a future and quality of life that provides tremendous opportunity and education for our children, and a great encouragement and incentive for they and their families to remain here in our area. In the coming months, we plan to offer answers to exactly those questions. In the coming months, we'll be sharing information about the significant impact that the funding that we seek will have on Calcasieu Parish. Besides what it does for us from a national reputation standpoint, from a life-saving and property-saving standpoint, and from a dramatic educational opportunity, it is extremely significant, the number of jobs created, the increase in tax revenues created, and how those tax revenues can fund education, our road and bridge improvements, and public safety. Now, each of us, no matter what corner of the parish that we come from, will benefit from the ripple effect of every dollar spent by visitors coming to experience the Calcasieu Parish that we have the privilege of calling home. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mark McMurray, a member of our Science Center's board, who will discuss the impact that this funding will have on the citizens of our parish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stream. Before you leave the podium, Mr. Stream, any questions or comments for Mr. Stream? Okay. And Mr. McMurray?
Thank you, Gray, and thank you, members of the jury, for allowing us to be here, but also for your service. And, Mr. President, with your permission, I would like to digress just one moment to talk about service before we get into this agenda item again.
I thought you knew how this went, Mr. McMurray. I need your address for the record, please.
Well, with your permission, I would like to just say a few things to the 5 of you that will not be here as of next week. As I thought about that today, I thought about an interview that I heard one time that the biographer of Harry Truman had in speaking with former President Truman. And he was asking the president, what did you feel like when you left office? Was it this huge void? I mean, did you went from this pinnacle of power? And Truman stopped him right in the middle of that and said, no. He said, let me tell you. He said, there was a time in our early history where there was a lot of discussion about what to do about former presidents and whether or not it was going to be degrading to them to be back into the common citizen role. And Ben Franklin took Mr. Hamilton to task and said, let me tell you, sir, he said, and I looked it up this afternoon to make sure I got his quote right. This is what Ben Franklin said. He said, in free governments, the rulers are the servants, and the people their superiors and sovereigns. For the former, therefore, to return among the latter is not to degrade them, but to promote them. So, to the 5 of you that are leaving, your role as servant and graduating into your role as sovereign and citizen, I'd say congratulations on your promotion and thank you for your service. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that personal note. As Grace stated, the most significant projects we can hope to see materialize for Calcasieu Parish focus on both the present and the future. The funding generated from this referendum will be combined with the $42 million in commitments that we currently have. $42 million that will leave Southwest Louisiana if we don't complete this current phase of our fundraising campaign. This is why those of us as volunteers on our board are asking you to give our fellow citizens in Calcasieu Parish the opportunity to support an effort to ensure that we don't let these committed funds evaporate and go elsewhere to fund other projects that will be of little or more likely no benefit to Calcasieu Parish or the people in it. In order to maintain and expand our quality of life in Calcasieu Parish, we need to join the significant industrial expansions that we've all heard about to create jobs and growth opportunities in the tourist arena and increase available sales tax revenues to sustain quality public services and infrastructure. We've been fortunate to work with and be guided by some of the world's top consultants with extensive experience in the development of science centers and museums, not only across the nation, but across the world. These folks have worked with institutions, just to name a couple, as the Smithsonian and the Microsoft Corporation. So we're not talking about small potatoes here. Based on our consultants' report, our Science Center will increase the number of tourism-related jobs in Calcasieu Parish by 15%. As we all know, new jobs provide an economic boost for local businesses throughout the parish and provide people with additional disposable income. The spending that results from this added income will translate into increased sales tax revenues as these workers spread money that ripples and multiplies throughout our local economy. The Science Center will impact each of us directly when the local sales tax dollars it generates are used to repave roads, to repair bridges, to enhance teacher pay, improve drainage, buy textbooks, and more. Everyone throughout Calcasieu Parish will enjoy the benefits this increased revenue provides. Our Science Center will allow children to see firsthand the career and education opportunities available in the field of science. And better yet, these opportunities, once thought only to be available if they left Southwest Louisiana, will be here, right in our own backyard. In fact, our board has made the commitment that every child in Calcasieu Parish will receive a Science Center VIP membership to our center, which will allow them a free visit to explore the center beyond any field trip that they may take as part of their school activities. In closing, I would simply suggest this, that this once-in-a-lifetime decision will help us now and well into the future. It's not just about a new building. It's about new jobs. It's about children. It's about tourism. It's about increasing our cultural offerings across the parish. And it's about investing in an ongoing revenue generator for education and infrastructure improvements. Thank you for your time this evening. I'll be happy to attempt to address any questions that you may have, and I'm sure Gray is available as well.
Thank you, Mr. McMurray. I'll invite Mr. Stream to stand back up there in case you want to answer any questions. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. This project, is this one of the funding on this? Why wouldn't it not be something like the hotel motel taxes would cover? I mean, I know like in the West Cal area, that's what's, it's funded the building of that arena and the building of that event center, and it's really not been a burden on the on the people of the parish. Is that something that's not available, or?
Well, the money from the occupancy tax and the hotel motel sales tax that is are dedicated under the law
Right.
to various sources. Some of it goes to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Some of it goes, as you mentioned, to the West Cal Community Center. Some of it goes to McNeath. And that money is dedicated statutorily, so it really isn't available. It's not available to us to do
Right.
that. And the amount that we're talking about now would severely hamper it to be taken even proportionately from all of those entities, would severely hamper their abilities to do what they do.
Unless you do an increase on it, unless you go take it back to have them change that.
Well, there are some restrictions in law about how high that can be. Now, you can do there are some economic development funds that allow you to increase that, but those funds go, ironically, back to the development that's doing that if you build a hotel or something, they can increase those taxes, but it has to go back to the developer of that hotel. So, the point's well taken, Ray. I don't think that's really, I don't see any way that that's available statutorily to us to access those funds.
Well, I appreciated what you said about us a while ago, and on that note, I was elected to represent the people of my district and my area, and I work in a pretty blue-collar atmosphere, and everybody I talk to at work, we're living a plant life, and they're pretty much blue-collar. They can't understand why you're asking a tax for something that what they thought was originally going to be privately funded, and now, and I'm trying to answer that, and I haven't really supported any tax increases while I've been in office. I have support except for the water district in Vinton, which is for water, which is an important, vital part of that community that they need. And then the other tax was a sewer tax, which was a revenue neutral tax. So I can't really, and we are the gatekeeper of taxation here. That's why y'all have to come before us, and so I can't really support it. This will be the last bang I go out on, but I try to, stay true to what I, believe, and so I appreciate your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. McMillan.
That's a great thing about being up here. We all have our own opinions, and we could agree to disagree. I am 100% behind this Hurricane Museum. I think it's one of the greatest things going to hit Calcasieu Parish. It's going to be monumental for us. Anytime you hear the word national, pull over. You want to go see that. This is going to be a great thing for our kids, for generations to come, the quality of life. It's a small 1.5 meal that we can all participate in. We don't want to leave $45 million on the table that they've already acquired, so we get to be a team player and vote yes on this. There will be people vote no. I'm going to support you 100%. Mark and your whole group, Gray, thank y'all for what y'all have done on getting that $45 million. And I can tell you that the people I've talked to are very proactive on this, and hopefully those will be the voters that turn out with a yes vote. So I'd ask the people of Calcasieu Parish to please support this on April 9th. Vote and make a difference, a generational difference in our community. This is going to be something bigger than life for Calcasieu Parish and all Southwest Louisiana. All our kids, our grandkids, the field trips that'll come from all Southeast Texas, all over Louisiana to this National Hurricane Science Center right here. My opinion, 100%. It's going to be great for us. Thank y'all for what you've done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Mr. Spell.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a structural engineer practicing the engineering profession in Calcasieu Parish, not only before, during, and after Hurricane Rita, I see the value in this facility. I have seen firsthand the impact structural failure from hurricanes has on people's lives. So with that said, I see the value on this, but I guess I want to hopefully attempt to provide a clarification that, in my opinion, this vote tonight is simply placing the decision on whether or not, as a community, we want to recognize that value. Right. We are simply placing that decision in the hands of the people that we serve. We will not make the ultimate final decision on this. We are casting a vote tonight to place that decision in the hands of the people. I, for one, am okay with the decision being in their hands, which is why I'm supporting this initiative tonight. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Spell. Mr. Landry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well said. That's exactly perfect. A no vote denies someone the ability to go out and vote for it. So, I mean, yeah, you wouldn't You don't want to do that. Maybe some people are passionately against it, but believe me, there's probably thousands that are 100% behind it, and I'm definitely one of those people. It's just, this will be something like nothing else that's ever happened here. To me, this is better than the economic expansion that's going on at all these plants. I would take this any day over that. I mean, and that's all a good thing, but this affects the quality of life, and I mean, it is a great project, and I know y'all spent years working on this, and y'all have done a great job. You know, I know you're a little short, and it definitely isn't from a lack of effort. I mean, y'all have racked your brain. I know y'all have gone all over the country to try to raise this money, and hey, you need a little help at the end. I definitely will vote for it. Anybody I can talk to, I've talked to a number of people about it. Some at first were maybe against it, but really, they didn't really know what they were against, you know, and after you talk to them, it's like, oh, wow, well, wait, I didn't realize, you know, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was going to be that big of a project. And I was able to change some people's minds, which I challenge everybody up here to do that. And I know y'all are going to work on it. Y'all got a lot of things planned to try to promote it and inform people of what they're voting on. And, you know, I wish y'all all the luck in the world. I hope it happens. But I'm telling you, you know, you got kids now, they'll go on field trips to NASA, or, you know, as my kids were growing up, I remember them going to Houston a number of times to see things. Those kids from Houston will be coming over here to see this. I promise you they will be. This is really a fantastic project, and I hope it passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Ms. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. When I think of the National Hurricane Museum and Science Center, I get excited because I think about education. And I think this will be a good thing for our kids and for us as adults. Most children, particularly when they're young and in elementary school, they gain so much of knowledge just from having one-on-one experiences. And with our kids taking all these national tests and the requirements are getting so steep, we need to expose them to things that will make them think. And knowing that we've been a part of the devastation from Hurricane Rita and Katrina, I can't think of a better way than to showcase something that will increase knowledge. Intellectual thinkers will rule the world, and we need to get our kids prepared. So I am 100% for this. I will try to explain and talk to many people where I go, and I go a lot of places, all of my different organizations and everything. I think if they really knew and understood the impact, I mean, we're talking about economic development also, but I'm focusing on increasing our children educational experiences to make them more intellectual. I mean, what could be better than a 5 or 6 year old kid running around telling us what this means and what that means? And I think this is a neat thing. So I'm asking, you know, for the support of this. And I appreciate the work y'all doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Mr. Simeon.
And I appreciate the project too. It reminds me back of when after the hurricanes, when we tried to do the bond issues, and you had some of the same similar discussions. And the best thing that happened out of that was that everybody got a chance to say exactly what they wanted, you know. I think the people of this parish, we're at a crossroads as to where we are. You know, do we want to invest in ourselves? Do we want to be the place that we want to be, or do we want to sit back and hide and say that, no, we can't do anything? Some people can call it a tax. I can call it an investment, you know. Are we willing to invest in ourselves? If somebody's coming from around the country, around the world, willing to invest $40 million in our area, willing to invest 80-something, 90-something billion dollars in our area, what are we willing to invest to improve the quality of life and make all this happen? So what we're doing now, today, isn't going to reflect what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. It's going to define us for a generation. Right. I think eventually we have to step up and see if we're willing to invest in ourselves. And I echo Shannon's sentiments. I think the people need to speak. I think this needs to be put to a vote, and the people need to come up and say, do we want a better Southwest Louisiana? Do we want a better quality of life for our children and the generations to come? And do we really want to be what we complained about all these years, and let's start putting up and investing in ourselves. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Simeon. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have been through many discussions. I know there's other entities that have come to this board and asked for us to, put a tax on the agenda, and we have told them, not a good time. The taxing atmosphere is not good. I was against that then too. All I'm saying is, and I've said this before, we should be consistent in the way we do things. I don't understand why this one was so more important than that other entity that came before us. We didn't let that go to the vote because we chose not to. We said it was a bad time, bad taxing environment because the sewer tax just failed, and So this is the point where we can do. We have control of it, and that's what I'm doing. I'm exercising my right to take control of it when it comes to us right now. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I thought it would have been great if it was privately funded. It was going to be self-sufficient. But part of our job is to keep government from growing. And this it's still government, whether it's a private entity coming or nonprofit entity asking for a tax. It's still on the backs of the people of the parish. And this will not just be a one-time tax. It's going to be a continuation of maintenance tax, no different than some of the other taxes we have in the area that, people complain about. Why are we supporting, some of these other entities? Why aren't they self-sufficient? And if this was a self-sufficient, project, I wouldn't have an issue with it so much. But it's not going to be a self-sufficient project because it'll always be a maintenance tax. So that's why I choose not to be for it. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Ms. Trimmie.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank you, Mark, and you, Gray, for the hard work and for all of those that have been working with y'all for this giant step or huge leap for Calcasieu Parish. And I also want to thank y'all because we have tonight from all the museums, but we have two from the community of DeQuincy, the DeQuincy Railroad Museum and then the DeQuincy Town Hall Museum. The DeQuincy Railroad Museum, the visitors are second only in numbers to the Convention and Visitors Bureau here in Lake Charles. We see many thousands of people, and they come from every state, and they come from countries, different countries. So we appreciate the inclusion and seeing that you're not just investing in this one project, you're investing in all of Calcasieu, from Sulphur, Lake Charles, DeQuincy. Everyone that has a cultural center is going to benefit from this. And so I want to appreciate we're all in this together. So I just appreciate all your hard work, and I want to thank those that are so interested in bringing our children up with this type of, like if you go to Houston, where the astronauts go off to be in the sky. Well, I've never been there, but I'd sure like to go. This is sort of like that. It's a ground zero. So thank you very much. I won't elaborate anymore, and I want to thank everyone that came tonight that are working so hard to make our life here in Calcasieu Parish better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trimmie. Mr. Farnham.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank y'all for being here tonight. I know y'all have worked extremely hard on not having to be here tonight.
Right.
And if there was any possible way that you didn't have to be here tonight, I know you wouldn't be here tonight. But the opportunity is here. Mr. Spell put it very eloquently that this is merely a vote to let the people decide what they want for themselves. And I do support that effort of letting them decide. Maybe, Ms. Tammy, you can answer. Give everybody an idea of what 1.5 mils does in property tax to, say, a $200,000 home.
Do you know, Mark, it's not
Do
much.
y'all know?
I think
I didn't want to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. The average, the average assessed value home in Cashew Parish, that person would pay, that family would pay a little over $6 a year, a little over 50 cents a month toward $1.50 tax. A $200,000 home would probably be somewhere in the $18 a year range, $1.50 a month.
So this is, I do view it, just like Mr. Simeon said, as an investment in our community rather than a tax, and I do support it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farnham. Mr. Scott?
Yeah, you know, this investment, we'll call it, I like that word. This investment is no different than most of the other places we all travel to go visit their museums and those things. Those people have invested the same way in order to have those amenities for us to be able to enjoy. We should be able to do the same thing. And our youngest member in this chambers today is Miss Callie Grace back there. Miss Callie, wave your hand to us. And that young lady one day is going to remember that she said in here when we discussed, what do we want to do? What do we want to be like? And when she goes and visits that museum, she's going to speak highly of, I'm glad we did this. How awesome is that? We're changing lives today. We're not waiting for them to change when we build a building. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any other discussion or questions for Mr. McMurray or Mr. Stream? Well, we do have some other speakers on this item. Mr. Guidry.
I was just wanting to say, Mark and Gray, you know, we've always supported you guys, man, and how you brought it to us was extremely professional, and how you organized everything. I'm ready to call for questions, Mr.
We
President.
do have some other speakers on this item.
Okay.
Okay. Thank y'all. Mr. Henry Missy. No? Okay, Mr. Arnold Natali.
Mr. President?
Yes.
You want to set a time limit? I don't know how many speakers
no.
we have.
No, we're fine. And Ms. Natali, your name and address for the record, please.
Arnold Natali, Highway, Highway 101, 101 East Highway 90 and Highway. I'm not against this deal whatsoever, and I think Gray and Mark did a wonderful job. So I'm going to talk to Hal McMillan like a son, okay? And Hal is the man that's really for this, so I want to get my point across, because I think that looking at what's happened in the past, and hey, I watch these guys at this museum, and it's wonderful to have a museum what Cameron went through and all this bill here. But I read the newspaper, and they get a dog deal in here in town, and that's kind of a disgrace, okay? Overnight, they get a dog park in town, and we're tonight deciding if the people are going to vote on it, and you know the people are not going to vote on it because they didn't pass a sewer tax in Moss Bluff, a simple sewer tax. And we have all this extra money in these road deals and all this stuff you have, and we have this extra money in the sheriff's department that they have. And I think it's wonderful because our parish has hired a lot of people and done a lot of things. Now, son, you asking me for a Volkswagen, and on that bill up there you have a Greyhound bus. If that thing makes $2.5 million a year, in 10 years it's going to take $25 million, and we need 15. And the second thing we asking for is to put all our friends on that bus, because we're going to do the other museums too. Now, wait a minute. These boys been working hard, so why don't we tighten our belt and gather up some money in here, and we don't need this tax on these landowners that are concerned here. You know why the landowners are concerned? Highway just built a new school, all right? I helped call to get them people to vote to tax me because they needed a new school. They're going to need a new school in 2 years again. All these places are going to need schools. These towns are going to need sewer. You guys got a terrible big bill coming with all the influx of these people, because unfortunately they come here and use our facilities before they give us any money. And that makes us crowded for apartments, for camps, and everybody here is doing good. But I worry about the schools and the infrastructure and the stuff we have here, and I think we need a serious belt tightening and kick out a little bit of money and let them build this thing. Man, don't tax some more till we need it. These taxes are not passing. This man told you reality tonight. I'd love to sit in there and tell how great it is, too. But it's not getting him any money. This doesn't go anywhere tonight. The man didn't speak a while ago on his taxes because the people got to vote on it. I hope the people pass. That's hard to do, to get them to pass this. It's more than hard. Mark's been here a long time. If anybody can get it, he probably can. But we got enough money without coming here tonight and doing this. I just think if you guys tightened your deal down and got in here and we made a few changes on something and you call the sheriff, he's got a little extra too. Everybody's saying what they have extra. Come on now. We can fund this thing without going through all these elections and stuff. We just keep, when we give you money on taxes, it's easy to renew it, and y'all all know it. It's easy to renew it. It's hard to get a new one. Ask him the last time they got a new one. It's been a long time. You got to use better here of what you got. You know, you got to tighten this down, and that's all I'm asking is for the police jury. Hey, don't let this go. Don't let us lose the $45 million, okay? Everybody's going to be for it, okay? Don't put it to a vote on the same old guys. Come on, man. Use your money better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. Any questions or comments? All right. And I'll ask if there would like to be any rebuttal, Mark or Gray.
Not really a rebuttal. I would just say we thought about asking Arnie to make up the difference.
And if I could say, if he wants to claim me as a son, I want him to will.
The only thing that I would add from our perspective is, and this is kind of to you, Ray, if I don't know who else has inquired about asking for permission to have an election for taxes, but I would say this, that if you had some group that came to you and said, we got $42 million, and we'd like you to help us with putting an opportunity for the public to come up with $15 million, I'd vote for that every time if I were in y'all's shoes. So, and I think that separates us from perhaps others that have come and asked you for the opportunity to have a vote for taxes. We're coming with a pretty good, with 74% of what's necessary here, and that's committed to the project. So that's the last comment.
Thank you, Mr. McMurray. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Spell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just real quick, and I just want to address the sales tax issue because if we go into all of it, we'll be here a long time. But right now, there's 9.75% sales tax assessed in Calcasieu Parish. 1% of that, at least in Moss Bluff, goes to the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury for Public Works. 4% of that goes to the state of Louisiana. Another 4% or 3%, depending on where you're at, goes to the school board. And then there's 0.75% that goes to the Calcasieu Parish Sheriff's Office. So I hear comments like, you guys got a lot of extra money. Anyone could always be better. We could always be better about how we spend our money. And I will never deny that or argue that fact. But when you look at the fact that 8% or more of the sales tax in this parish is going to either the state or the school board, I would argue that maybe we're probably above average on how we do things. Can we be better? Absolutely. No denying that. And we should always strive to be better with what we do with the tax money that the people grant to us to use for their benefit. But again, when you just look at those numbers, I don't think that it's as bad as some people may illustrate it to be. So again, this vote tonight is to give that decision to the people. I think that represents the republic that we have, that the power is with the people and the people should make that decision. Again, I am okay with that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Spell. All right, any other comments? All right, I think we do have some opposition, so let's have a roll call vote.
This will be a reverse roll call vote, and it is to adopt the resolution as stated on the agenda. Mrs. Trimming?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
No.
Mr. Stelling?
No.
Mr. Spell?
Yes.
Mr. Simeon?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Mr. Landry?
Yes.
Mr. Guillory?
Yes.
Mr. Guidry?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
She stepped out for a minute, Kathy.
Thank you. Mr. Farnum?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
Yes.
And Mr. Andercott?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, thank you, ma'am. That motion carries. Moving on to item number 10, consideration of adopting a resolution approving a cooperative endeavor agreement between the police jury and the Calcasieu Parish
Move on
Public
10.
Trust Authority
Second.
for the purpose of assigning avails of the tax to the Calcasieu Parish Public Trust Authority for funding the tax into debt for acquisition, construction, operation, and maintenance of the National Hurricane Museum and Science Center Incorporated. Motion by Mr. McMillan and a second by Mr. Scott. Any discussion? Any objection? We do have one objection.
Who was that?
Do we have more than one objection on this item? Okay, just please note, we have one objection, that's Mr. Taylor on this item.
Yes, sir.
That motion carries. Moving on to item number 11, consideration of adopting a resolution
on
calling
11.
a special election to be held in Waterworks District Number 2 of Ward 4 of Calcasieu Parish, Louisiana, the district, on April 9, 2016, for authority to levy and collect a special 6.38 mil tax for 10 years, beginning January 1, 2016, and ending December 31, 2025, with collections from the levy estimated to be $430,242 for one entire year for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, improving, maintaining, and operating waterworks facilities, including the purchase of water within said district. Motion by Mr. McMillan, second by Mr. Landry. Discussion? Mr. Landry?
I just got a question for Mr. Bean. If this goes on the ballot and this passes, and this Waterworks District gets the money, and they end up with all this extra money that we all know we got, we ought to be able to just take that money and help with that museum. Can't we do that?
I assume that's a rhetorical question.
Sure it is. Just go ahead and let us know we can't do that. And do we have extra money in different funds? Yes, we do. And we manage our money very well. People are mad at the federal government. Don't be mad at us. You ought to be proud. You're living in a parish that has no debt. And if you live in Lake Charles, you're living in a city that really has no debt and has been debt-free for quite some time. The extra money that's there is dedicated, and you can't just spend it on whatever. So just like this is dedicated for this water district and nothing else. So we can't take the money and spend on other things. Can't spend it on the road or whatever. That's all. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Any other discussion? Mr. Guillory?
Is this a whole parish-wide?
No, sir, it's strictly in the Ward 4, Number 2 district. You operate it as the governing authority, but the district boundaries are still the same as they were prior.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Guillory. Any other discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 12, take appropriate action on a request by James York
Move on
to
12.
appeal the decision of the Planning and Zoning Board on Tuesday, March 17, 2015, which was to grant preliminary subdivision approval for the development of West End subdivision for residential development in the 2900 block of West Houston River Road in Ward 4. We have a motion by Mr. Andercott to uphold planning and zoning or overturn planning and zoning, and a second by Ms. Trimming. All right, we do have some speakers on this item. I'll call up Mr. James York. Mr. Gale, will you be speaking for Mr. York? Okay, Mr. Gale, name and address for the record. And just a refresher, the way we'll work this is we'll allow a certain amount of time for the applicant to speak, and then we'll allow some rebuttal. Before we move forward, Mr. Crane, would you like to offer a few
I was just going to
words?
briefly go over some of the facts of the case, just for the jurors, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Okay, sure. This is the West End subdivision appeal. It's located on the northwest corner of West Houston River Road and Gill Drive in Ward 4. This is in Police Jury District 11, Miss Sandy Trimmage District. The developer is Keelan Construction. On March the 17th, 2015, the Planning and Zoning Board granted approval for the 105-lot West End subdivision. The subdivision consists of 117.9 acres of A1 agriculturally zoned property, with each of the lots being approximately 1 acre in size. The development will be served by Waterworks District Number 11 of Ward 4 and 7, and will have individual sewer technology. On April 13, 2015, Mr. James York filed an appeal to the police jury. Mr. York is requesting a reconsideration of the approval for the West End subdivision. During the interim, Mr. Sam Gabb, legal counsel to the police jury, suggested that the developer, Mr. York, seek to work out an amicable agreement to avoid further action by the police jury. Unfortunately, the two parties have not been able to reach an agreement, hence the reason for the matter before you tonight. Therefore, the hearing tonight is for the police jury to determine if the Planning and Zoning Board's decision was correct. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Crane. Mr. Gale?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Tom Gale. I'm 713 Kirby Street,
And I'm
Lake
sorry,
Charles.
before we go further, I didn't really get to finish earlier. We'll allow a certain amount of time for the applicant to speak, and then we'll allow the exact amount of time for the opposition to speak. So I apologize. Go ahead, Mr. Gale.
I'm here on behalf of Keelan Construction, who is a developer of this particular project. The owner and the principals of Keelan Construction are here, Mr. Keith DeRusso and his team. If there's any specific technical questions that you have about the subdivision, they can certainly answer much better than I can. I am an attorney here in town, and I asked to speak first. And the first couple of things I want to touch upon is that what we're here on is an appeal of a preliminary subdivision plat. And I'm going to repeat, it's preliminary. If it goes forward, you're going to see it again when it becomes a final plat. But the reason why it's preliminary is because it has to go to engineering. And Mr. Connor and his team have not had a chance to review this yet. So it will be coming back before you if this is allowed to go forward. The second thing I'm going to point out is that this was approved, it was recommended by the staff, and it was approved by a unanimous vote of the entire Planning and Zoning Board. Not one member voted against it. There is not one request for a variance. There is not one request for a rezoning. This is a plat that was submitted that is technically in compliance with the existing ordinance. It's approved by the staff, and it's approved by the land board that y'all have appointed. The reason why there is an appeal here is because there's probably a snafu in your ordinance. And Mr. Gabb and I have talked about this at length, and there is technically no reason, and there is no right under state law for a preliminary plat to be appealed to this board. What the state law says, if that somebody wants to appeal the decision of the board, they have to go to court. They don't come to you because you're going to see it as a final plat. And we actually have a challenge on this on another matter. However, we're here tonight asking that you please approve, actually to consider, not even consider the appeal, but in the event that you do, that you please approve what the Planning and Zoning Board did. The jurisdiction of what you have is over the Planning and Zoning statute. And the opposition that we faced in front of the board dealt with things other than the plat. It dealt with issues that are not within your jurisdiction and control, wetlands, endangered species items. It's a land use issue, and that's all your ordinance covers is land use. The land use items that are covered under this appeal deal with traffic and drainage. The traffic and drainage issues are going to be addressed in the preliminary subdivision review. So it has not had an opportunity yet to go through engineering, and the plat you're seeing up on the monitors is going to be different after the engineers get through doing their work. And so in this preliminary part, we ask that you please allow the subdivision to go forward and allow this matter to go. And I'm just going to drop as a footnote, allowing an appeal of a preliminary plat is a dangerous precedent, because what happens is it allows somebody who comes in who is an aggrieved neighbor, and we all know that a lot of times people don't like change in the neighborhoods, but allows them to hold up a development. And a development's not going forward, even in a preliminary review, because who's going to go spend the money on a traffic study or a drainage analysis whenever they have an opportunity to come back and get it reviewed? So it's a bad message to developers. Mr. DeRusso and his team have been sitting back waiting for this to be able to go forward. We tried to work out a compromise. We weren't able to do so. That's the only reason why we're back here tonight, but we did make a legitimate and concerned effort to allow this to go by compromise, but it's not there. So I'm going to come back in rebuttal. Be glad to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Gale. Mr. McMillan?
No, Mr. Taylor.
Nope. Mr. Taylor?
Oh, yeah, I was telling you.
You were telling us.
Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Or Mr. President, I'm sorry. Mr. Gale, I've driven past this property several times, and y'all have cleared a lot of the property, or a good portion of it, have y'all?
No. Mr. DeRusso has not done that. What happened, it was owned by a timber company. It's been timber property for years and years. When it was sold to the previous owner, they retained the timber rights. They had 2 years to go harvest the timber. Rainier Timber Company out of Miami, Florida is the one who cleared it.
Okay, so the timber itself is cleared. I mean,
That's correct.
I guess when I said it was cleared.
I'm sorry, yeah, but the timber company did it, yes.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. Now, when this came before us the first time, y'all know me, I've fought a lot of subdivisions. Yes, Mr. Talley. You know, this one, I had calls on it, and, you know, I told them I'd be grateful if there were 1 acre lots, you know, being developed in my area. You know, there was no variance asked on this particular piece of property because it met all the guidelines that we've set out for property owners, you know, to guide them in their development. And like you said, it still has to go through a drainage study. It still has to go through a traffic study. It still has to, you know, the wetlands, it still has to go to the Corps of Engineers. That's a beast in its own trying to deal with them. So there's a lot of hurdles you still have to go. But as far as what our guidelines are, you've met all those. So I have, you know, I don't see what the issue is here. So, you know, I'm against I don't know how we're supposed to vote this.
Against the appeal.
I'm against the appeal, so thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. All right. Mr. Gabb, how much time did we use up there?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Before we move forward, Mr. Gabb, would you address what he was speaking about with the loophole in our current ordinance?
Well, and it's debatable whether it's a loophole or not. We can argue about that. But our ordinance is very clear. At this stage, it does allow for an appeal to the police jury, and that's why we're here. We haven't had one in recent time, but in the past, we have allowed these appeals to come forward. We can argue whether it's proper or not. That's for another day. But even from this jury's decision, either party has an appeal right to the 14 JDC still.
And so the residents could theoretically appeal this again in
Yes,
the future?
they could.
Okay.
And Mr. Galey is correct, though. This will come back to you later if it passes through all the engineering phases and the final approval.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gabb. Okay, I will now, let's see, we have 4 speakers against this development. So I'll call you all up, and could we ask for 2 minutes per person, and that'll give you even more time than what we just experienced right here.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
If I may, the gentleman that is making the appeal, Mr. York,
Mhm.
I might suggest that maybe he be given his first opportunity to speak.
Okay. Mr. York is the applicant.
Right.
And I
Or
just
the
called.
appeal.
The appellant. He's the appellant.
You heard.
He filed it.
Okay, I see. So y'all didn't have a blue card filled out. That's okay. All right. I'll call on Mr. York first. Okay, Mr. York. So you did initialize the appeal. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I think, just for the record, I think it would have been appropriate for me to speak and then he have an equal time to rebut.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
the length of time that he takes to speak has nothing to do with
I understand.
what I need
This
to be.
this scenario is a little backwards than what we're used to, so I apologize for that. Normally, we have an applicant that's appealing, not the residents. So, Mr. York, I'll give you the floor, and unless it gets to be something crazy, we'll let you speak, okay? All right.
And I'll be brief. I want to say, for starters, that I'm not opposed to progress. My whole career has been about creating opportunities, working in industry, and so on. I understand the importance of that to the community. But I am concerned about a number of things having to do with this subdivision. Mr. Gale raised some good points about it is a preliminary plot, and perhaps some would think it's premature to challenge it at this point, but if there are glaring deficiencies and things that we can see that create a problem, why should they move forward with a preliminary plan that we know is defective? I'm not going to go over my whole appeal letter here, but I do want to hit on a few high points. And I opened this when I submitted it in April of 2015. Dear Calcasieu Parish Police Jurors, I'm writing to appeal and request reconsideration of the Calcasieu Parish Planning and Zoning Board's decision to approve the subdivision of property on Houston River Road for the development of the West End subdivision. As the owner of property adjoining the proposed development, I need to bring to your attention a number of important considerations that were not addressed by the board, which have the potential to affect the quality of life in Calcasieu Parish. The first one on my list was wetlands, and I understand that the police jury is not in the business of enforcing the Wetlands Protection Act, but the objectives of the Wetland Protection Act are similar, or should be similar, to our objectives as citizens and your objectives as elected officials to preserve, where it's appropriate, this environment. The majority of the 120 approximately acres of the proposed subdivision is wetland, according to the definitions of both the state of Louisiana and the United States Army Corps of Engineers. The land is frequented by migratory ducks and geese, as well as any number of other aquatic, semi-aquatic wetland species of birds, reptiles, amphibians, and mammals. A significant amount of work has been done leveling, filling, and draining this land, both prior to and after the final logging operations on this property. I have to take a little issue with something that Mr. Gale said, was that all that clearing was connected with the logging. It was not. You can go out there now and you can see where the paths for the roads for the subdivision have been leveled out. There were ponds on that property, at least 2 ponds that had been filled. There's drainage has been cut in numerous places. All of this in violation of the Wetlands Protection Act, and the Corps of Engineers has informed us no permits have been issued or applied for to allow for the destruction of these wetlands. Now, if Keeneland is going to proceed with this type of activity, disregarding the laws that are on the books, what assurance do we have that they're going to observe the directives of the engineering group and other groups, the drainage and the traffic and so on? I think it's suspect. And I would mention, just in passing, the Corps of Engineers is currently investigating the activity to determine if enforcement action is warranted, and a cease and desist order was signed on December 10th, 2015, ordering them to stop work. The next item on my appeal was the traffic considerations. Those of us who live up in or around that area know that between the hours of 4 and 6 p.m. on most weekdays on Highway 27, that intersection backs up a half a mile sometimes. The traffic's already almost unmanageable, and if we add 105 households on Houston River Road, it's going to be much worse. Perhaps the biggest consideration, though, is the drainage. The natural drainage of the majority of this land was northward and eastward towards the Houston River. The developer's proposed layout, which is preliminary, shows drainage easements which modify the natural drainage, redirecting all of the runoff into the ditch on Houston River Road. A significant amount of work on these drainage modifications has already been performed in violation of permitting requirements of the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Redirecting the runoff from an additional 100 acres or so into this same ditch is clearly not wise and exacerbates an already hazardous condition in this area. During some heavy rains, there's a serious flooding issue on Claiborne Street. Redirecting runoff to the south will impact this as well and will essentially cut off access to much of West Houston River Road from Sulphur during heavy rains. I will try to be real brief. The other items that I wanted to bring up real quickly, again, Mr. Gale mentioned the endangered species issue. Well, that's not in your jurisdiction, but it is a matter of concern to the people of Calcasieu Parish, and it should be to you as a result. The land on and adjoining the proposed subdivision is and was home to a population of red cockaded woodpeckers, an endangered species, listed by both the U.S. government and the state of Louisiana. The logging operations conducted over the last few months have already destroyed much of this habitat, but there's still significant pine forest immediately adjoining the property. It is imperative that any additional clearing, earthwork, or construction not be allowed to further destroy or disturb these nesting areas. This should include assurance that excavation on or near the property lines that could damage the root systems of established trees on adjacent properties will not be allowed. So basically, in consideration of the above, we requested that the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury and the Planning and Zoning Board consider the following actions and any others that might help mitigate the damage to the environment and the community that is posed by the planned subdivision. Number one, defer any approval of the subdivision until the United States Army Corps of Engineers, the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, the Louisiana Department of Natural Resources, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, and any other appropriate state or federal entity has the opportunity to adequately assess the impact, legality, and permitting requirements of these actions. Number two, increase the minimum allowable size of a home site on this property so as to reduce the total number of occupants. For an agricultural area, a minimum lot size of 3 to 5 acres is much more appropriate than 1 acre. This would lessen the impact of increased traffic on the existing residents of the community. Defer approval of the subdivision until a credible traffic survey has been conducted to assure that the costs and disruption due to any necessary infrastructure improvements to nearby roads are adequately considered. Similar consideration should be given to the impact of 105 additional households on the local water system and whether the wetlands could support the addition of septic systems for this many homes. Number three, mandate that the overall drainage pattern of the area remain unchanged. Runoff that currently flows to the back or north of the property should still be directed to the north and ultimately into the Houston River. Runoff from adjacent land must not be impeded, and if redirected, should ultimately discharge to the same ditch to which it presently flows. Under no circumstances should this development be allowed to increase the flow of runoff into the ditch on Houston River Road. I'd like to add there also, I've owned the property next to the proposed subdivision for 11 years now, and in the first 10 years, the front yard never flooded, not once, until the first hard rain that we had after this excavation work started on the subdivision. Then we had probably 6 inches of water in the front yard, and I have photographs of that if anybody'd like to see them. Every effort should be made to prevent any further damage to the habitat of the red cockaded woodpecker. A buffer zone of the largest practical size should be provided between the new development and the remaining woodpecker habitat surrounding the proposed subdivision. This buffer would also mitigate the potential of the subdivision's residents to disturb or be disturbed by Sebastopol geese from the breeding facility. We request that a buffer zone of at least 100 feet from the property line be established within which excavation or construction would be prohibited. It should be obvious that the approval of this subdivision should be deferred until all of the above concerns have been addressed and appropriate modifications have been incorporated into the subdivision design to mitigate these many potential risks to both the environment and the citizens of the existing community surrounding the proposed development. Thank you for your consideration. Please feel free to contact me at any time if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. York. And again, I will apologize. 90% of the time it is the applicant that's appealing. In this case, it was a citizen, so you should have been allowed to speak first, so I apologize about that. Before you head away from the podium, any comments or questions for Mr. York? Mr. Guidry.
Yes, I have one. I was listening to what he was saying, and it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Mr. York, it seemed like you were actually putting the blame on Mr. Gale and Mr. DeRusso for what was done to the land. Wasn't they cleared by different landowner that owned the property then that actually cleared it? And if there was anything that was done illegal for us for endangering the species, anything like that, shouldn't that have been brought toward the owner that cleared the property?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I just know what has happened there, and I also know that before the timbering was even started, the intent was to build a subdivision before the last round of timbering.
That had nothing to do with Tom and his group.
Did it?
Am I correct? Had nothing whatsoever to do with him. That was cleared by a different entity, I guess, owned the property, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just getting from you that you're saying that they're the reason why right now we're looking at endangered species on this property because of what was done, but they didn't clear the property.
Well, I don't know, but I believe that they were a party to an agreement with Mr. Molazan prior to that land being cleared. And the reason that I say that is that when the land was cleared for the last logging operation, as I said, the roads have been cleared out consistent with the plat. Now, the loggers didn't just by coincidence go in there and put in all these roadways that are consistent with Keelan's plat by accident. I don't believe that. But I'm not putting the blame on Mr. Gabb or Mr. Gale. I'm just saying that the actions that have been taken on the property and that are being taken on the property are causing and threaten to cause much more serious impact to the community. And being a neighbor there and knowing a lot of my neighbors, I know we're being impacted, and we're going to be impacted a lot worse unless there's a very, very careful scrutiny on the subdivision to be sure that all of these things are addressed very thoroughly.
Mr. Gale, has there been any calls from Wildlife and Fishery for us to this property?
You know, Mr. Guidry, they're not that I'm aware of, but to get to some of the points that we made, there are enforcement procedures in place through the police jury, through state, federal agencies, whatever the case may be. Those things can be addressed. I'm not aware of anything that has been done.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Guidry. Mr. Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. York. I'm going to just in a little while and take a point of personal privilege, but I want to personally invite you to come out on Wednesday, January 13th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the West Cal Event Center at the Calcasieu Exhibit Hall off of Arena Road, because you brought up drainage, and you talk about years I've never flooded, but here it is. Growth has now come, and now I have 6 inches of water in my yard. Public opinion is going to matter as we continue to move forward with our drainage initiative. So your firsthand experience, you know what's happening, you know how it affects you and your neighbors. Now will be your chance to come out and voice your opinion on these drainage issues. So I hope you take us up on that invitation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. All right, any other comments or questions from Mr. York? Mr. York, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to Larry Derrick. And Mr. Derrick, your name and address for the record, and if you could, we did have quite a long presentation. Keep your comments around 2 minutes, please.
Certainly. Larry Derrick, 2939 West Houston River Road. I live south of where the subdivision is supposed to go. Right now, I've noticed since the people building the subdivision have gone in and cleared the land and piled up huge piles of trees that they pushed up. And they have cut trenches back to Houston River and Gill Drive so that place can drain to the south and to the east, that our ditches are filling up really fast when we have a rain, overflowing. There is a ditch on the north side and south side of Houston River Road, but for some reason it's very, very shallow on the north side. South side is very deep, and they're constantly coming in and deepening it. But right now, since some of this has been cleared, our yards, in a heavy rain, are filling up. Our yards are getting covered. If they put that many houses and that much concrete going in there, it's going to be in our houses, not in our yards. If something is not done about the drainage, from what I'm seeing on that plat, that the drainage is going to come by our way, not west and north like it drains now. Also, Houston River is a very narrow road. It's a rural road. Some of the ditches are quite deep. Have a lot of traffic. Since Sasol's been in there, there's more and more traffic comes through there. If you put that many more houses, that much more traffic, it's going to be a lot of traffic on that road. Something needs to be done about the highway, the ditches and such, if that much traffic is put out there. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Derrick. Any questions or comments, Mr. Derrick? Thank you, sir. Mr. Wade East?
I don't think so.
Mr. East, your name and address for the record, and again, if you can try and keep your comments to around 2 minutes, appreciate it.
I'm Wade East. I live off 2658 Condeas Lane in Sulphur, which is northeast of the property. And there's definitely a drainage issue because where Kuntz and Gill intersect, there's times there's water 4 to 5 foot over the road there. And I've talked to Ms. Tremmy about it, and they've changed the culverts, and it's gotten a little better. But there's times we've missed work because you can't get out that way, and that's the only way in and out. And also about the logging, those roads they cut in there didn't have culverts put for them log trucks to come in and out. They were using a road off of Gill on the north side of the property. Those roads were cut in there for the subdivision. I have to disagree with what he said about that. And you know, I'm not against development, but drainage is definitely an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. East. Any questions or comments, Mr. East? Mr. Taylor?
Well, not so much for Mr. East, but I don't have the plat in front of me, but I know because of all the drainage talk here lately, we've talked about, you know, big retention ponds, and I know, you know, the Bell Estate, they put a big retention pond, and, you know, that's been the, you know, the talk, you know, now we're trying to handle all this drainage. Is there going to be any kind of retention area in this development?
Are you addressing that to me?
Whoever can answer me that question.
According to the preliminary plat, I don't see one, any detention or retention pond in this preliminary plat. This plat shows all drainage easements.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we have to remember that this is preliminary. So they really haven't gone in and started, to my knowledge, engineering this so that, and they haven't submitted their drainage impact analysis.
Right.
So we don't really know at this point in time whether or not something like that may be required. It may be. We just don't know yet.
Well, I mean, I know with all the talk that's been going on with drainage and stuff, that was one of the big things, the big pushes. We need more retention areas
Right.
that we can, you know, gather this water up and hold it so we let it
It's
outflow.
just a little premature right now. We just don't know.
Well, I guess what triggers that? What triggers that, you know?
Well, in
yeah.
the stipulation that we placed on the applicant, and even in the ordinance, it requires that if they're going to impact the public parish drainage system, that, you know, Tim and his group are going to look at that to make sure that it's not going to, you know, do any harm or anything like that. So
Now's the time to catch it. You know, if we're going to be pushing that, then we need to, you know, really address it.
well, they have to start designing it too. I mean, they have to engineer it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Okay, thank you, sir. Miss Diana Backus. And Ms. Backus, if you could have your name and address stated for the record, please. And again, if you can try and keep your comments to around 2 minutes, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm Diana Beglis Backus, and hi. Thank you for letting me come up here. One thing, some of you may have known my
record.
Oh, my address, 3192 Jeffrey Lane.
Thanks.
Salford. A lot of you may have known my father was Ned Beglis. One thing he always said was, progress is good. But in this case, we have something that as I've gone by and looked at it, I've seen where the water is staying there. And also, when he talked about the, how it was the logging, but there's culverts out there, there's stakes with flags, there's the roads that are ready. And I'm just concerned about the drainage, of course. My home, I have a natural waterway that when it rains, it goes right through the middle of my driveway and it washes it away. I have to put the shell back. But that was something I could not change because it's wetlands and I could not, close that up. But again, I'm here because I'm very concerned about the drainage and that how many occupancies there in the traffic. It's already bad out there. So I appreciate that time.
Thank you, Ms. Bacchus. Any questions or comments, Ms. Bacchus? Thank you. And Dr. Dale Shantz. And Dr. Shantz, your name and address for the record, and if we could try and keep your comments to around 2 minutes. Appreciate it.
Dale Biglis Shantz, 2899.
Pull the microphone down a little bit.
Dale Biglis Shantz, 2899 Condios Lane, Sulphur, Louisiana, 70663. And I'm the lady who meets with you in the area schools. So glad to see y'all. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I love the American way. I think that it's so good that we can talk and we can discuss things. I am against the planned West End subdivision as it was approved by the zoning committee. I am not against progress. My dad would just probably turn it over right now thinking I'm up here talking. I am for development, but I would think that it should be in a little larger acreage, like 3 acres to 5 acres per, family dwelling. That makes it still the country. I'm really concerned about 105 septic systems being all together and think that it's going to be a very smelly situation. And I know that sounds probably silly, but what's the long-term impact of that? I mean, we're talking mini city within a little area. An acre is probably a lot of land to city people, but to country people is not a lot of land. I'm trying to think how you're going to have a cow and a home and maybe a dog on 1 acre. And I just cannot get it envisioned in my mind. And anyway, another thing about this is the road situation. We've got 2-lane roads. At one time, they were gravel. I've lived out there 44 years. And then during Daddy's time that he was a police juror, well, they asphalted all the area roads, which he thought was real good, and I do too. I like the roads. But people, there is no place to pull off the road on the side of the road. If a state trooper wants to catch you speeding, he has to pull into someone's driveway. We don't have shoulders there. We have deep ditches, and the ditches don't carry all the drainage. So we've got situations. Why am I so concerned? Because of water drainage, because of sewage, because of law enforcement. If you want to know about all that, I'll be glad to. You can call me and I'll tell you how my dogs were killed on our property. We've got all kind of people who get bored and they want to go out with a gun and shoot. And I am for hunters. I'm not against that. But I want to tell you, I'm for bored people who have nothing to do because they live so far from town that there's nothing to do.
I apologize. We're trying to kind of keep it organized. If you just have maybe a couple last comments you can make, and then we'll ask if there's any questions or concerns for you.
I ask again that the owner of the said property amend the proposal to increase the acreage, okay? That's what I am asking for. And as far as the wetlands issue, this has not been dry property except for one time when there was a drought. The rest of the time, it's been wet. I do have pictures if you're interested in that. And that's all. I thought about, I'm an avid football fan. This is ending it. And Pagano, is that his name? Chuck Pagano, the coach for the Colts. Well, I said, this man went into that and he talked for all day and they changed their minds about him. And I wish I had all day because maybe I could change your mind. Or if you're going one way or the other, maybe I could talk to you and get you to think about all these different issues. But this is my home, and of course it's very personal to me, as it would be to anybody here. So that's how I end it. And thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Shantz. Any questions or comments for Dr. Shantz? All right, thank you, ma'am. We did go a little bit out of order, so Mr. Gale, I'll invite you to come back up. Just a couple minutes, please, if you want to offer any final words.
Glad to answer any specific questions. Mr. Taylor had a question about retention ponds, and yes, there will be a retention pond on it. In the preliminary, when the preliminary plat had been submitted, we had not finished and still have not completed the work with the Corps of Engineers. Some portion of the property is going to be subject to the jurisdiction of the Corps. It's going to require permitting. That's going to dictate what we're going to have to do with the retention ponds. And I know Mr. Connor is going to hold us to zero impact. That's what the ordinance says. That's what Mr. Minton, who's the engineer sitting right here, is going to make sure that's what happens, to zero impact on it. As far as the drainage goes, we're in flood zone X, so it's not even the flood zone. The base flood elevation is at 18 feet, and there's portions of this property that's over 23 feet. So it's 5 feet above base flood elevation. The problem is that when you go in and cruise the timber, these folks aren't the neatest harvesters, and their job is to get in and get the timber and get back out. So as we know, wetlands is not subject to your jurisdiction. That's a different agency. Somebody else is dealing with that. A lot of the things we heard with the complaints about the density and the acreage size, in order to accommodate that, you'd have to rewrite your own ordinance. You didn't hear one complaint tonight that there's anything in this plat or this ordinance, this application, that was not consistent with the ordinance that you guys adopted. So any specific questions, I'd be glad to address whatever we can.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Gale? Mr. Spell.
Mr. Gale, thank you for being here this evening. Was a delineation done on the property?
Yes.
And what was the percentage?
Percentage, we're not completely through with the core. Our consultant has it at 38%, in a range of 38%.
Okay, so it's not all wet.
That's correct.
Okay. And is there a cease and desist order in place?
The Corps only has jurisdiction over the portions that's wet. And so for the remaining 60% of it, 60% portion of it that's not wet, they have no jurisdiction, so it doesn't pertain to that. So they're free and clear to go do anything they want on anything the Corps does not have jurisdiction over.
Okay, but
that includes roadways. And what's happened, the stakes and the markings are the consultants that are working with us in doing the wetland delineation, and they'll go out and say wet, dry. And so they'll physically stake it. And so anything that you see that's dry is perfectly fine. And everything that's wet, you stay out of.
But is there a cease and desist order on the entire property?
Not on the entire property, only the portion that the Corps is going to determine to be wet.
Okay, and was that cease and desist order issued as part of the Corps permit process?
That's correct.
Or was premature work performed out there which solicited the response from the Corps?
No, it's a standard operating procedure. What happens is the way that the permitting process goes is the developer will go retain a consultant. The consultant will go in and do an initial determination, and then based upon that determination, they'll come back and refine it into a delineation. Then when they submit the delineation, they do a request for preliminary jurisdictional determination from the Corps. The Corps will then determine whether or not there's jurisdiction. If they do determine there's jurisdiction, they'll come back and say you can't work within that area. And if they feel like it's necessary to issue a cease and desist, oftentimes they'll do that. And it's not so much for the property owner, it's to make sure that if a contractor shows up or somebody goes out there, you don't have a person who doesn't have a vested interest in it not know and go drive a truck or a bulldozer through something that's already been determined to be wet.
What type of sewer treatment will be used for this development?
Individual.
When you
They're
say
on 1 acre
individual, is that mechanical?
Mechanical. On individual lots, in accordance with the ordinance. They could go down to half-acre lots, but they'd have to put in the community system.
So it will not be a septic system, they will be mechanical systems?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Spell. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Gale? All right, thank you, sir. Mr. York, you were the gentleman that brought this appeal, so I'll allow you to come up for 2 minutes. If you have any last comments, and if there's any questions or comments from the jury for Mr. York. And again, Mr. York, you try and keep your comments around 2 minutes, and if there's any questions or comments, we'll go from there.
Thank you. Well, I think I pretty well said my piece. I would like to reiterate that although we keep bringing up that this rule or that rule, wetlands or endangered species are not in your jurisdiction, but the best interest of the citizens of Calcasieu Parish are. And it just happens that those particular regulations and rules are consistent with that. And when they're disregarded, it indicates that the best interests of the community are not being necessarily addressed. Again, I'm not opposed to progress. I don't have any problem with development in the area. I know that the parish needs the housing, and they're nice property, nice houses that have been proposed from what I've seen. But I just think that the approval of the subdivision was, even the preliminary approval was premature, and I think that it needs to be handled in a very responsible manner, and just to assure that we don't have a long-term negative impact on the community. And that's pretty much where I'm coming from. That's why I filed the appeal. And I also know from talking with many of the neighbors over the last year or so that our thoughts, my wife and mine, are shared by virtually everyone on Houston River Road from Highway 27 most of the way over to Edgerly Highway.
Thank you, Mr. York.
Plus all the side roads and everything. It's a shared concern.
Thank you, Mr. York. Any questions or comments from Mr. York? Any other questions or comments from the jury? Mr. Landry?
Yeah, not for this gentleman. I just have a couple questions.
You go ahead and have a seat, Mr. York. Mr. Farnham, you have a question for Mr. York?
Mr. Crane.
Yes, sir.
Oh, you do for him?
No.
Oh, okay.
You can go have a seat, Mr. York. Thank you.
I'll get on the list.
Let's say an individual has a piece of property, and they would go out and say part of it is wetlands. I mean, they're not supposed to go out there and attempt to drain that, are they? I mean, you can't. Isn't that against the law? I mean, federal law?
I would, yes, sir, under the core requirements.
Right.
I think
I mean,
so.
I know we don't enforce that, but.
That's correct.
You know, and some of those points that was brought up, I guess, is kind of disturbing. In court, you know, I don't know what happened and what order and who did what or whatever. I mean, some of that, you know, it worries me a little bit, but I mean, it looks like we got the cart before the horse. I mean, you know, there's a lot of things that they're concerned about, but all of those things are going to be addressed as the process moves forward. And who knows? It may never get to. There may never be a subdivision there. I mean, if the Corps of Engineers has a problem with it, it's not going to happen. As far as the drainage, if it was developed, the drainage would probably be a lot better than it is right now. I mean, you know, this timber company had cut all these trees down that were soaking up water out there before, and all those are gone, and nothing else has been done really to the property to try to manage that drainage. And I know that's part of that process. Engineers would look at all of that, and they wouldn't be able to put any water on their neighbors, or it wouldn't move forward. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You know, and the same thing with the traffic. I mean, they'll have to do an analysis on that and have to, I mean, they're not going to be able to have a negative impact. I mean, if they do, they're going to have to fix it somehow.
That's correct.
With their money. But I just feel like it's still preliminary. I mean, you know, I mean, we're not there yet. Is there a motion on the floor, actually?
Yeah.
There is a motion to overturn planning and zoning, which was to approve the
appeal. Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to support that, I don't think. I just feel like the cart's before the horse.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Landry. Mr. Farnham.
Thank you. I know we have a code of ordinances, and we have subdivision ordinance that covers all this, and they met everything in there. My question is, if we disallow the preliminary approval of this to move forward, do we open ourselves up to liability or potential lawsuit?
Well, there's
Been
still,
faced with this before.
there's still an appeal right to the 14th Judicial District Court. So the applicant or the developer will certainly have his due process and be able to get his arguments in front of the court when needs be.
But their action would be against the police jury for not following our own ordinances.
Well, our ordinance, we are following our ordinances right now. And certainly you have the right to review this development. Our ordinances give us that right. If they disagree, then their avenue is to appeal to the 14th Judicial District Court. And that preserves their rights, and I don't think that subjects us to liability in anything you do right now today.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farnham. Any other questions, comments? All right, we have a motion on the floor to overturn planning and zoning, which would be equivalent to disallowing the project to move forward. So, is everyone clear on that? A vote of yes will be to disallow the project to move forward. A vote of no will be the opposite.
Yes means no, and no means yes.
I was trying to say it more eloquently than that.
I feel the presence of algae growth.
Algae growth, he says it best.
All
That's
right.
what it means.
Let's have a roll call.
Begin with the A's this time. Mr. Anderpont?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
No.
Mr. Farnham?
No.
Mr. Guidry?
No.
Mr. Guillory?
No.
Mr. Landry?
No.
Mr. McMillan?
No.
Mr. Scott?
No.
Mr. Simeon?
No.
Mr. Spell?
No.
Mr. Stelling?
No.
Mr. Taylor?
No.
And Mrs. Trimmie?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Motion fails.
fails.
All right.
Mr. President, and I think you clearly stated it, but I guess to clear things up, since we're sitting in an appellate manner, to clear things up, maybe a motion to uphold planning and zoning or affirm the appeal.
Move to uphold planning and zoning.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. McMillan to uphold planning and zoning and a second by Mr. Stelly. We're going to have some opposition, I believe. Is there any discussion before we take this vote? All right. Let's have a roll call vote.
Mrs. Trimmie?
So just to clarify, this is the opposite now.
Yes. No.
Yes. Yes means
A vote of yes will be to allow to move forward.
I vote no.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Stelling?
Yes.
Mr. Spell?
Yes.
Mr. Simeon?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Mr. Landry?
Yes.
Mr. Guillory?
Yes.
Mr. Guidry?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin is not here. Mr. Farnham?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
Yes.
Mr. Anderpont?
No.
The motion carried to uphold the planning and zoning.
Motion carries. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, moving on to item number 13. Consideration of adopting a resolution amending the current procedure and ordinances relative to the disposition of adjudicated properties within Calcasieu Parish. So a motion by Mr. Anderpont and a second by Mr. Spell. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 14, consideration of adopting
on
a
14.
resolution approving an
Second.
assignment of servitude agreement between the Police Jury and Entergy Louisiana LLC for the South Frontage Road project. Motion by Mr. Taylor, second by Mr. Guidry. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 15, consideration of adopting
Move
a
on
resolution
15.
approving a servitude agreement
Second.
between the Police Jury and the Sabine River Authority for the South Frontage Road project. Motion by Mr. Taylor and a second by Mr. Simeon. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 16, consideration of adopting a resolution
16.
authorizing
Second.
an offer to purchase and thereafter expropriation of full ownership of approximately 1.5 acres from a larger tract of about 6.5 acres owned by Cumulus Broadcasting Incorporated, located on Old Spanish Trail, East Burton Street, as needed for the KCS Old Spanish Trail Overpass Project in Ward 4.
Did you make that motion?
Motion by Mr. McMillan,
Second.
second by Mr. Stelly.
Discussion.
Discussion, Mr. McMillan.
Thank you. You know, Westlake has long wanted an overpass over railroad tracks at the grade separation at Sampson Street. This is going to be a grade separation over railroad tracks, but it's going to be on Truesdale Road, Old Spanish Trail, and So we're getting an overpass due to the economic development and expansion of the Sasol project. If they didn't do an overpass there, it would be completely closed by trains. I can tell you this is our first overpass, and I'm going to strive hard to get the second overpass as quickly as I can over Sampson Street. So I know people are going to be disappointed that our first overpass is over Old Spanish Trail, but we're going to work very hard to someday have an overpass over Sampson Street.
I'm not.
I am.
I'm very disappointed in you.
Well, they would love to have their first one there, but we're going to have an overpass. So there we go. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. McMillan. Any other comments? Mr. Farnham?
Thank you. It's, I'll actually be happier to get this one because this is the path that I travel to work every day. And I can tell you that KCS track is, sometimes you'll sit there for 30 minutes in the morning and the traffic's backed up for 3 to 5 miles. And it's pretty horrific. And that KCS switchyard is going to be 10 times larger than it is now. So this is imperative that this gets put in. So I appreciate the support of everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Farnham. Any other discussion? Mr. Scott?
Yeah, I know these overpasses are, need money to build them, so who's paying to build this one?
KCS, from what I understand.
Well, maybe they'll pay to build the one over
That'd be
Sampson,
Union
too.
Pacific.
Work on them, work on them.
We'll try.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any other discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. And after every item, I've been reminding myself to say hello and welcome Mayor Stinson here tonight, from Vinton, and I keep forgetting, and I apologize. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Item number 17, consideration
Move on
of adopting
17.
a resolution approving a cooperative endeavor agreement between the police jury and the town of Vinton for utility extensions associated with the improvements to Johnny Bro Road. Motion by Mr. Taylor, second by Mr. Simeon. Mr. Taylor, discussion?
Just briefly, thank you, Mr. President. Since this is my last meeting, and this particular project is something that I've been working hard on for that area, Vinton, but really wasn't me that started it. I know Tim's worked hard, trying to get it, but really it was Gene Saunier who was part of the Harbor and Terminal Board, and he really was the one who brought it to me one day. We went out there, took a look, and said, "I'd like to put this road in here," and it started from there. And Mr. Saunier, his anniversary for his passing was here just a few days ago, and just like to take the time to recognize that he was one really instrumental in getting this project off the ground, and give him honor for that. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any other comments, concerns, objections? Motion carries. Item number 18, consideration of adopting a
Move on
resolution
18.
authorizing cooperative endeavor
Second.
agreements between the police jury and the following entities for the installation of bay doors as part of the retrofit bay doors project. Motion by Mr. Stelly, second by Mr. McMillan. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 19, consideration of adopting a resolution
19.
authorizing cooperative endeavor
Second.
agreement between the police jury and the Waterworks District Number 2 of Ward 4 for maintenance and operation of the Mossville water line by the district. Motion by Mr. McMillan, second by Mr. Guidry. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 20, consideration of adopting a resolution
So moved.
authorizing the submittal of a
Second.
continuation grant application to the Annie E. Casey Foundation for an amount up to $60,000 to become a regional hub for the foundation's Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. Motion by Mr. Guillory, second by Mr. Guidry. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 21,
Move on.
consideration of authorizing the
Second.
parish engineer to advertise for the following projects. A, Calcasieu Parish Project Number 2016-01. B, Calcasieu Parish Project Number 2016-02. C, Calcasieu Parish Project Number 2016-03. D, Calcasieu Parish Project Number 2016-04. E, Calcasieu Parish Project Number 2016-05. F, Calcasieu Parish Project Number 2016-06. Motion by Mr. Antrepon on all bullets and a second by Mr. Guidry. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 22, consideration of authorizing the parish purchasing agent to either advertise for bids or purchase utilizing state contract purchasing procedures for vehicles and/or equipment for use by the police jury departments. Motion by Mr. Brame, second by Mr. Landry. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item number 23, take appropriate action on the terms of the following members of various boards and/or districts. A, Mr. Odis Jones' resignation from the Ward 4 Fire Protection District Number 3.
Move to appoint Jeremy Duplashin.
I have a motion to appoint Jeremy Duplashan by Mr. McMillan and a second by Mr. Landry. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. B, Ms. Macy Letard on the Ward 4 Fire Protection District Number 3.
Move to appoint Wayne Fleming.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McMillan to appoint Wayne Fleming, second by Mr. Landry. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. C, Mr. Hal McMillan on the MCAL Board of Directors.
Move to reappoint.
Motion to reappoint Mr. McMillan by Ms. Trimmy and a second by
Not me.
Thank you, Ray.
Taylor.
Not me. Thank you, Ray. That's amazing.
You need
I really
more
didn't
work.
think you were going to be able to get the motion.
Any discussion? Any objection?
Just one,
Any objection?
just one.
I need a roll call.
I may vote against
All right.
myself.
That motion carries.
Thank you.
D, Mr. Francis
Move to
Anderpont
appoint
on the
Second.
MCAL Board of
Anderpont.
Directors. Motion to reappoint by Mr. Guillory and a second by Ms. Trimmy. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries.
Yeah, what do y'all
E,
do here?
Mrs. Elizabeth Griffin on the MCAL Board of
Move to
Directors.
appoint Mr. Tony Gilrery.
Second.
Motion to appoint Mr. Tony Guillory by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Guidry. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. G, Mr. Brent
Move
Kading
to
on the
appoint
Calhoun
Kevin
Parish
Guidry.
Public Library
Second.
System.
You missed.
No,
Missed
I
it.
apologize. I did. He's not going on the library board.
No.
All right. I apologize. F, Mr. Kevin Guidry on the MCAL Board of Directors. Motion to reappoint by Mr. Guillory.
Second.
Second by Mr. Farnham. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. G, Mr. Brent
Move
Kading on the
to
Calhoun
appoint
Parish
Mr.
Public
Kading.
Library System. Motion to reappoint by Ms. Trimmy.
Second.
Second by Mr. Farnham. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. H, Mr. Elwin Brent Washington on the
reappoint.
Calhoun Parish Public Library System. Motion to reappoint Mr. Washington by Ms. Trimmy and a second by Mr. Simeon. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. I, Mr. Andrew Saunier on the
Move to
Waterworks
reappoint
District
Mr.
Number 10
Andrew
of Ward
Saunier.
7. Motion to reappoint Mr. Saunier by Mr. Landry, by Mr. Taylor, and a second by Mr. Landry. Any discussion?
Just
Mr. Taylor?
Just a quick one, Mr. Andy Saunier is Mr. Gene Saunier's son, so he's carrying on the tradition of serving, so.
Excellent.
Thank you,
This
Mr.
is
President.
not, this is not reappoint, this is to appoint.
This is reappointment.
Oh, this is?
Yes, it's a reappointment.
Motion to reappoint Mr. Saunier by Mr. Taylor, second by Mr. Landry. Any discussion, any objection? That motion carries. J,
Motion.
Mr. Roy Arant on the
Motion to
Ward 6
reappoint
Fire
Roy
Protection
Arant.
District Number 1. Motion to reappoint Mr. Arant by
Roy Arant.
Mr. Arant by Ms. Trimmy and a second by Mr. McMillan. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. K, Mr. Garland Royer
Move
on
to
the Ward 6 Fire
reappoint
Protection
Mr.
District Number
Garland
1.
Royer.
Motion by Ms. Trimmy to reappoint Mr. Royer, second by Mr. McMillan. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. L, Mr. Roland Bertrand.
Move
on the
to
Ward
reappoint
6
Roland
Fire
Bertrand.
Protection District Number 1. Motion to reappoint Mr. Bertrand by Mr. Stelly, and a second by Mr. Taylor. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. M, Mr. Gaston M. Dubrock
Motion
Jr.,
to
Ward
reappoint
2 Fire
Gaston
Protection
Dubrock.
District Number 1.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Stelly to reappoint Mr. Dubrock, and a second by Mr. Taylor. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. N, Mr. Darren S.
Motion to
Miller,
reappoint
Highway
Darren
Fire
Miller.
Protection District Number 1, Ward 8. Motion to reappoint Mr. Miller by Mr. Stelly and a second by Mr. Landry. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. O, Ms. Sally
Motion
E.
to reappoint
Meyer,
Sally Meyer.
Highway Fire Protection District Number 1 of Ward 8. Motion to reappoint Ms. Meyer by Mr. Stelly and a second by Mr. Guillory. Any discussion? Any objection? Oh, Mr. Anderpont.
Not on that. I have
Okay.
a question for staff. in a minute.
Okay, that item passes.
Okay.
All right, that motion carries. Mr. Anderpont.
Thank you. I'm going to be very brief. At one time, there was a disproportionate of board members on the Calhoun Parish Library System. Is that still the way it was? We have fewer than the city of Lake Charles?
Right here.
That's the way it was at one time, and I really have a problem with that because, I mean, we're responsible for the library system as I appreciate it. And I don't know what process we need to use, if it can be changed. I think it needs to be. And I don't need to know tonight, Brian. I know we're running
You have,
Over
Mr. Andrew
time.
Pont, you have 4 appointees of the police jury and 5 appointees by the city of Lake Charles.
Okay.
But I believe, and this is a question Kathy may be able to answer, about like Mr. Kading's appointment tonight in the city of Lake Charles. But it may have to get final approval from the jury.
Well, the city of Lake Charles recommends, or they have their own appointment, but we confirm them, I believe
Right,
is
so
how
you,
it's worded.
in a way, you have some authority even for theirs, even though they do direct them.
What jurisdiction do they have, or if any? What I'm saying is, I mean, we're the ones that have to put the tax on the ballot to get the money in the coffers. I mean, what I would like to know, and I have nothing against the city of Lake Charles, what I'm trying to say is, if we're the guys on the front lines, why do they have as much authority as we do?
Well, I guess that's a matter of opinion on whether we do it, or you do. The system used to have, of course, it wasn't parish-wide, and I think in the transfer to what it is today, that answer lies in that transfer from what used to be partially a city library system, but I'd have to get more detail.
That's what I'm saying.
I'd rather give you better detail of what I.
That's fine.
What I
And
know
look,
tonight.
what I'm trying to do is bring it to the forefront. If we are disproportionate, I think it needs to be addressed, and that's my position. And I rest my case, Mr. President, and I yield the floor back.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew Pont. We have some points of personal privilege. Let's go ahead and address some of those right now. Mr. Farnham.
I'd like to tag on to that just a little bit. It is a little confusing because there's libraries scattered throughout the entire parish and a lot of other municipalities, and why they would all come from the same area is a little disturbing. So it's something that I do feel like needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farnham. Mr. Scott, point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to remind the public that on January 12th, January 13th, January 14th, that we'll be holding public open houses to discuss drainage. You know, we understand that flooding occurs here. We've heard it tonight over and over again about drainage. So we just want to make sure that we have hear your opinions, your concerns, and even your thoughts on how it could be better. We'll introduce some scientific knowledge on some of the things we think could help this parish to drain better and make all of our lives a lot better. So Tuesday, January 12th, the Lake Charles Civic Center from 5:30 to 7:30. Wednesday, January 13th, the West Cal Event Center, 5:30 to 7:30. And Thursday, January 14th, the Moss Bluff Middle School, 5:30 to 7:30. So please come out and help us solve this problem. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Spill?
Thank you, Mr. President. I know we were supposed to say all our goodbyes back in December, but I would like to spoil myself just a little bit tonight if my colleagues would indulge me. But since I will not be here next week, I did want to take the opportunity to say thank you, Mr. Hunter, for stepping up and serving the jury as president. I will not have that opportunity to say that next week, so I wanted to do it tonight to thank you, and it's been an honor and a privilege for me to serve with you, and I was honored to have you as our president this year.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Secondly, I would like to offer a prayer humbly to the Lord my God. I hope that God blesses each and every person of Ward 1. I hope He blesses each and every person of Calcasieu Parish. I also want to ask that He bless each and every one of my colleagues here tonight, that He continue to hold each of you in His good graces. And I also want to say it's hard for me to list all of you because I have worked with so many people over the last 8 years. I wish I could name each and every one of you, but we simply don't have that time. But I want to ask that God bless each and every person on this staff. You have been tremendous to me and my family both. I will miss working with each and every one of you, and I just hope that God holds you in His good graces over the next 4 years. And please keep and continue to do what you do. And last but not least, for those that are coming on for the next term, I would ask that God bless you with guidance and wisdom, because you're going to need it. So with that said, it has been an honor and a privilege. I thank God for the opportunity that He has given me, and I wish the best for each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spell. All right. Mr. Taylor?
Well, I was going to wait till the very end, but
That's all right.
the time we need to do it, I
Getting
can
it
do
out.
it now, or I
Yeah.
can wait.
Right now.
Appreciate it. I'd also like to, reiterate what he said about the jurors and the people on this board. It's a tough board to serve on. You have to make some major decisions. Sometimes you're the only vote, but you got to stick with what you came here believing in, and I felt like I've done that. And my wife wasn't here for the last meeting, so I couldn't give her honor and thank her for all her support, because she was, she's a hardworking lady and she had to work that night. And I would like to take this time to thank her for all her support, and all my kids and my family. And it's been a great ride. Hey, it's not too bad not having to worry about all these decisions. I sit back going, man, y'all crazy. I actually told Judd that. I said, Judd, you're crazy. Boy, his eyes got kind of big when he looked at me. I said, well, I don't mean, but it's a tough job. If you really want to serve, sometimes you got to make some tough decisions. So, I wish all the best to him, because I know, he's going to represent the people of Carlos and Vinton, because it's both areas. So. Thank you all for all your support, and I've enjoyed serving with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any other points of personal privilege before we move on? All right. And the past couple weeks, we had some real legends leave us in Southwest Louisiana. Item number 24 is a consideration of adopting a resolution of condolences before to the family of the late Russell J. Stoops, Jr. Motion by Mr. Andrepont and a second by Mr. Landry. Discussion? I'll offer that Mr. Stoots was a longtime friend. Every corner in this parish bears his signature almost, because he was a builder of homes and businesses, but he was also a builder of a better Southwest Louisiana with his smile, his family, and a man that was a man of God. Saw him at church often, and very sorry to see him leave, but what a legacy he left behind. So thank you all for this. Any other comments on this item? Any discussion? Any objection? This motion carries. Item number 25, consideration of adopting a resolution of condolences to be forwarded to the family of the late Claude Sias, who served as the District 4 police juror from January 2008 to January 2012. Motion by Mr. Guillory, second by Mr. Spell. Discussion, Mr. McMillan.
Thank you. We love Claude. He brought a lot to the table. He was a great debater. He represented the time when we needed him to be there. Tony had ran for another office. Claude got elected, and Claude got elected and did a great job. And you become family up here. We all are family. We've lost another part of us when you lose a guy like Claude, who was just fun to be around and did a good job. He worked hard on the issues that he fostered. Of course, the pharmacy stuff for the seniors, he brought a lot of that to the table. His wife, Johnny, a beautiful smile and always great to be around. And I've had a chance to talk to her, and she appreciates all our love and prayers that we're giving her and support. And Claude's going to be well missed in Southwest Louisiana, and he did a great job while he was on his jury. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Mr. Farnham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I only knew Claude for a short period of time, but the entire time that I worked with him at Phillips, our offices were about 2 doors down from each other. So the entire time that we were on the jury together, we visited almost on a daily basis and had some pretty deep conversations and sometimes arguments. And so it was a pleasant time, and he's a quality individual. I got to know him quite well in the short period of time that I did know him, and he is going to be dearly missed.
Thank you, Mr. Farnham. Mr. Guillory.
Thank you. I just want to say Claude was very good and active in the church. He was a 4th degree, and he was really good with the kids and taking over the church and everything. So my prayers definitely go out to his family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guillory. Mr. Spell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I sat next to Claude for 4 years, and he was a good man. And I'm going to miss him, and I wish his family prayers of comfort and relief. And God bless his family. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Spell. Mr. Simeon.
Claude and I were spending a lot of time together. We were part of the same Mardi Gras crew extraordinaire, so we had a lot of fun together. also church members and the Knights of Peter Claver. You know, Claude was the junior night commander, so he would bring the youth in to teach them how to the spiritual side of growing up as well as becoming young men. And I'm honored because I sit in that position now with the Knights as the junior night commander. I'll say that Claude is, as much fun as he liked to have, he was always a good person, you know. His heart, I learned something about it. I didn't realize he was an all-state football player because I could see Claude rolling over somebody and probably helping them up and saying, look, we're good friends. But, you know, I always say this sometimes, but I think heaven beams a little brighter because a person like Claude is up there now. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Simeon. Mr. Scott.
Yeah, you know, you really got the best of both worlds with Clyde. Like Mr. McMillan said, when it came to serious and debate, you could actually, Claude, excuse me, but you could actually, where'd I screw up? You could actually get the best of both worlds with him, you know. He's serious. He really put his life into what he believed, which was youth. You know, they spoke highly of him today. Mr. Summers spoke about him being a big part of getting the Mark started and going to Denver with them. He believed in the youth, and he knew that they were going to make a difference. But he was so funny. I mean, anytime we would sit down and it wasn't up here, even sometimes up here, we would just laugh. And I remember that one night when he got his nickname, and, oh, Douchey. That was so great. You know, he just, man, it was just a really great time, and he would make you laugh. So, and I think he'd be laughing right now knowing he got his nickname called out one more good time.
I can't believe he said that one.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Guidry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can't believe Scott said that. But like Marshall said, I knew Claude way before. he actually served.
Really knew him, huh?
Yeah, he actually served on the jury because we both was in the same Mardi Gras crew together, and just a fun individual to be around. And his wife Johnny, real big in the church here at Immaculate, and he's gonna be missed. But you try to remember the fun times, and I'm still thinking about what Mr. Scott said.
Okay, back up.
Prayers goes out to his family, and Claude will really be missed. Yes, he will.
Thank you, Mr. Guidry. Any other discussion?
Just
Mr. Taylor.
real quick, Mr. Claude, I only met him a couple of times when I first started, you know, when I was coming to the meetings and trying to learn my way around here, and you could tell right off the bat that he was a genuine, nice, kind individual, and he was somebody you just liked right off the bat. And I got to sit in his seat for 4 years, you know, so I have a lot of respect for him. So.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Claude was a nice person.
You absolutely will. All right, that motion carries. Item number 26, consideration of adopting resolution
Move on to 26.
be forwarded to the family of the late William Billy Navarre. Motion by Mr. McMillan, second by Mr. Scott. Discussion. Mr. Taylor.
Billy was, a fixture in Sulphur. When he came to town, my kids were young. He opened up that auto dealership, and right off the bat, he started supporting the community. I mean, I can't count the number of kids that have grown up in Sulphur that had the name Billy Navarre on the back of his shirt. And he was a strong individual, but he was always good to the community and to Sulphur, and he's going to be greatly missed. I knew his boys as they grew up, and through church and stuff, and I know they're going to miss him, and the community is going to miss him, and our prayers are out there for him. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Simeon.
I want to offer prayers to the Navarre family. He has twins. They're in my daughter's class, and we were at a father-daughter dance, and that was my first daughter. It's his first daughter, so we were just sitting there amazed at how much different it is when you have your daughter with you and have fun than anything else, But I want to offer prayers for the Navarre family, but also for the twins in their class, because that fourth grade class at EDS not only lost Billy lost. He was a father to two of those children, but that's the same class that Ethan Vincent, Trooper Vincent's class, is in. So I want to offer prayers to all those 9-year-olds, because that's a lot for children to go through. But, at the same time, their faith has to be strengthened, knowing that eventually everybody's going to see each other again. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Simeon. Mr. McMillan.
Yeah, Billy was a great friend. He, I got to kind of get in his inner circle and be at his house at a few parties, and what a big heart he had. There was never an auction that I did that he didn't just, the generosity of Billy DeBar touches us all one way or another. Whether a teacher, and what he did for our teachers and our kids, and the paper just full of our honor students. There's not probably a school board in Southwest Louisiana that doesn't have his name on it, from McNeese to all our high schools and stuff. There's a hole in my heart, and we'll keep him in our prayers and the family in our prayers. I miss Billy DeBar.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Mr. Guillory.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to say, Billy, I was in the automobile business for 25 years, and Billy started me off. And I tell you what, you have an excellent training program and help you with everything, but he's definitely going to be missed. I want to say prayers out to the Navarre family and everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Guillory. Mr. Farnham.
Thank you. I've known Billy, I can't even remember how long I've known Billy. Our kids all grew up together. He was a fixture on the sports fields. Like Hal said, at every single auction, he was either there or he made darn sure that somebody was there in his place, and to make sure that checkbook was opened up and flowing into the community. And I can vividly still remember the face of one of his salesmen as me and my son drove up to try to find a car for him one day, and the salesman come trotting out and greeted us in the parking lot, and Billy and one of his sons come driving by, and he reached out the window and told that salesman his, "You make sure you give him whatever he wants." And the face on that salesman just hit the floor at that moment. But he was a very generous man and very loyal to the folks that were loyal to him as a customer. And because he did a lot of business with my wife because we did business with him. And so he was very loyal to the people that were loyal to him, and he's very generous to the community. He's going to be missed. Our prayers go out to all of his children and wife and extended family. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farnham. I'd also like to echo some words that were said here today. If you need to understand the definition of philanthropy, look at the life that Billy Navarre led. And I grew up in, you said he was a fixture in Sulphur. I grew up in Lake Charles, and, you know, the name Billy Navarre was almost synonymous with Lake Charles. You know, it's hard to imagine Lake Charles without Billy Navarre moving forward. And even though his time here was short, thank God we had someone like him here, because Lake Charles, Southwest Louisiana, Calcasieu Parish is a much brighter place because of him and his generosity. So prayers for the entire Navarre family, I know, are coming from this jury. Thank you all. All right, that item passes. Any other items to attend to?
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, and a second. We are adjourned. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you all.